Hi, I'm Peter Birch and welcome to CrittaCam. Today, I'd like to talk to you guys about captive care of diamond pythons. That's right, one of my most favorite snakes. Now, believe it or not, I am famous for dirt snakes, but I also have a bit of little love in my heart for diamond pythons. And in fact, diamond pythons were the very first python I ever bred. That's right, back in the early 90s, I bred diamond pythons for my very first time, my very first python, and I absolutely love these guys. Now, today I want to show you something different. Now, the reason why we're doing this outside is very simple. I like to keep diamond pythons outside. Now, for 30 odd years, I've been keeping them inside in different cages and all sorts of things, but I prefer to keep them outside because why else wouldn't you keep them outside, especially when you live in their perfect environment like this? Very fortunate to live in their environment. So what do you do when you build a cage outside? Make it look like their environment. This is it right here. Now, these steps are a little bit sketchy. So as you can see, the design of this cage is a little bit different. So it's basically a giant aviary. Now, I've put this platform in here. Now, this cage I actually built probably about 30 odd years ago when we first moved to this property. And the reason why I built this cage is because it had a timber base and it was on wheels. And I used to keep it on my back veranda. Now, what I also found is I put a sheet of glass on top, which would help build up the temperature up the top, right? I actually removed that sheet of glass because it caused a lot more issues than it did in benefits. And I built this hot box, basically this beautiful little plastic box up the top here. Now, what does that plastic box do? Well, it catches the morning sun and it heats up. So it actually gets probably about 5 to 7 degrees warmer in that hot box than it does in the rest of the area. Makes common sense, right? Now, one of the cooler things about this beautiful aviary here, as you can see, like I said, I've replicated nature. And how have we done that? We've done that with hollow logs, branches, let the ferns grow up. Now, this actually has a wire base now, which stops any animals digging in and allowing the animals to escape. So it's an absolute gorgeous little environment right in there, a little subtropical environment. One of the coolest things I like about this aviary in particular is I've actually painted it brown to help it blend into the environment, but also make it easier to actually observe the animals. The other cool thing is the height. It's nice and high, which means I can get in here and service it. Now, as you can see, the animals are cruising around in here, not a problem. And like I said, when you come around this way a bit, this hot box up here has a false floor, which allows me to gain access to get in there like that. And the reason why, guys, check this out. Look at them. They just get up there, sit in that nice hot box and suck up the heat. So that plastic obviously warms up. It's like a little sauna hothouse in there. Absolutely love it. And the cool thing about the removable floor is, you know, if someone goes to the toilet, I can keep it nice and clean. But more importantly, I can box that off and it maintains the temperature. So when you come out here first in the morning, stick your hand up, you can feel the difference. Now, the ambient air temperature here at this time of the year gets to about 3 to 4 degrees at night, which is pretty chilly, something that's pretty scary for most pythons, but for the diamond python, it doesn't seem to matter too much or mind. Now, we've given them plenty of places to hide down the bottom here, under rocks, in hollow logs. There's so many different rooms and places to hide. Now, the reason why it's important to give them so many places to hide is because, you know, these animals will bask at different times of the day. Now, when we kept these guys on the back veranda, what I noticed is we used to keep a nice deep leaf litter. You know, it would be raining, it would be 3 degrees Celsius, and you'd come out and you'd find a diamond python sitting in the water bowl. Doesn't make sense. In other aspects, it would be 42 degrees Celsius and the animals would be out basking in the full heat. So I've learned so much about these animals by keeping them and watching them and actually finding them in the bush here. That's right, we've had them wild in the bush. And over 30 odd years, I've learned that, you know, these guys really do love things like this. Like, that's old, a little bit degraded. So what do I do with it? I chuck it on the ground in the cage there because they're going to use that as somewhere to hide. That's right, somewhere to hide. They're going to get up underneath that, feel nice and comfy. Ambush predator, remember? So they like to wait for their food. And if they get a little bit frisky, they'll come hunting for their food. And then what do? I like to spruce it up a little bit. So the coolest thing is I can just go out, get some new furnishing like this, bit of greenery, chuck it back in here like this. And I mean, look at that right there. It makes him feel like he's outside the cage. It makes me feel like he's outside the cage. Makes me feel good, makes him feel good. Now, diamond pythons, you know, they have between 25 and 54 eggs. That's right. For me, on average, I used to breed them. We used to get about 26 to 28 eggs. We did very well out of these guys for quite a few years, breeding some absolutely spectacular animals. I mean, those colors, the yellows, the oranges, absolutely pop. Absolutely gorgeous creatures. Now, keeping them outside, there are a few different rules that are different to keeping it inside. So obviously we can't feed them all year round. We've got to be very cautious when we do feed them because we have multiple animals in this enclosure. So we need to be able to see each animal when we feed them. So it takes a little bit more time for me as a keeper to see them and register where they are and make sure I'm feeding them and make sure that we're all happy afterwards eating. We don't want anyone thinking someone else's food and grabbing hold of each other. So we'll sit here, watch them feed. Once they're finished feeding, sometimes I'll wet them down. You know, I'll get a bucket of water and splash them. Two things out of that. Number one, it can remove the smell of the food item, which is good because we don't want to smell like food, you might get eaten. The second thing is, by splashing some water on them, it almost resets their brain and stops them even thinking about food completely. They'll almost sort of go their opposite ways and go and find somewhere to hide. Now, the reason why we've got to give them multiple places to bask and seek places to hide is because we have multiple animals, right? So there's a place to hide under that rock, there's a place to hide down there, the hollow log under that rock, in this hollow log, up the branches here, they'll sit up here and bask, they'll go up the top in the hot box. Usually during winter, they'll spend more time up the top there and they stay in a communal sort of situation, which is all right. Now, the other cool thing about diamond pythons compared to things like carpet pythons, colours, temperament, and the third thing is you can keep multiple males together without any issues. They don't seem to be very aggressive towards one another or want to fight with each other, especially when it comes to mating. In fact, diamond pythons are one of the few sort of pythons that you usually find in a big mating bowl. You'll find half a dozen males trying to mate with the same female. So how do we do it? What do we do when we want to breed? It's very simple. Just watch what the animals do and let nature run its course. You'll see them mating during spring, obviously, August, September, October, and then you'll get eggs sort of late January, February, sometimes even March. So you just need to be cautious about that. Incubate the eggs, typically, you know, on vermiculite like normal, but I find these guys absolutely amazing animals and really pleasurable to enjoy, especially when they're kept outside like this. Now, I'm not saying keeping it inside is wrong, but keeping it outside I found is so much better for me and for the animals. So many areas for them to get stimulated. Now, the other cool thing is by these animals actually climbing, like back in the early 90s when we started keeping these guys as pets, we kept them in smaller cages, a little bit more arboreal, and what we seemed to have in captivity at that time was something we called soggy snake syndrome. So basically what that meant was we thought it was because of lack of UV, we thought it was a whole heap of nutritional things because animals are being kept in captivity. But what we actually worked out is because the animals weren't given enough area for them to climb and move around. So basically they weren't working out. They were just sitting on the lounge doing nothing and getting a bit of a beer belly, right? So these guys, now that they've got this, they're a lot more active, a lot slimmer, a lot more natural. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Make sure you hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget, guys, I am on the TikToks. If you like today's show, make sure you give it a like, and I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching CrittaCam.